The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness. I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal, coming to you with episode number 100 of the podcast. And I wanted to do something special for the 100th episode, and I pulled out an old recording from an interview that I conducted about a decade ago with my hero, my idol, Graham Kerr, the Galloping Gourmet, who had a program in those days, the Galloping Gourmet, seen by 100 million people around the world. It was the greatest, and still to this day remains the most entertaining, charismatic program in the history of food television. Here is my conversation from those days, long before there were podcasts, etc., etc., with Graham Kerr, the Galloping Gourmet. How are you?
Apart from, I would say that if I was to take myself as 100%, I'm probably 83.
Right.
83%, because I had an accident which was what caused the end of the Galloping Gourmet series, and that happened back in 1971.
Right.
And I was partially paralyzed during that time, and I'm getting it rather like an old football accident, which comes back to haunt you. In those days I was in my late 30s when that happened,
right.
And now I'm in my late 70s. So in that time, I get what I call pre-vertigo. I don't have vertigo spinning around, but I have it sort of just a slight dizziness which comes from a neck and shoulder, which is a little wonky. But if I keep digging in the garden and moving around the garden and trying to get some exercise, I think that works fine. I usually do very well.
You think that traces back to the accident?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I have tremendous health in every other respect. I've never taken a supplement of any kind, and I take an occasional Advil if necessary, but no medications, no health issues, nothing. So apart from borderline pride at not having to do those things, I'm all right.
Yeah, that's good. Well, all right. 83 is pretty good. We'll take that. How about Trina? How's she doing?
She's doing well. Trina's remarkable because she's now 15 years older than her oldest surviving parent.
Nice.
And her recent death of her brother, who was younger than she, and so she has a genetic tide, and sort of rather than going out with a tide, she has managed to stay on the beach, and which is good, and so we're very grateful for that.
That's great. All right, let me throw at you a battery of questions, and feel free to answer them in any kind of detail or brevity that you like, or don't answer them, But it'll allow me to kind of put together something that'll be fun and representative, and tell the story ultimately, that you would want to tell as well. So I've kind of divided them into 2 or 3 categories, like the beginning, and then there's got a lot of stuff here about food, and then an area on what you're doing now, and the kind of message that you want to put out. So I've covered a lot of ground here. So I'll just cut right to it. When did you fall in love with food?
Interesting question, because I was involved with food a long time before I fell in love with it.
Nice.
Yeah. the love or deep, I don't know that love is exactly right, but the deep interest and involvement with food took place in New Zealand when I was asked by a judge of the Supreme Court there, may not have been Supreme, but the judge of the court district asked me to come to a criminal hearing about a chef by the name of Monsieur Robert, who had been stealing checks in order to be able to keep his business going. And this man, his business, Monsieur Robert, was a private dining club at which this judge was a member and should have probably recused himself, but instead of that, he was admitting it to the courts and saying, this man is a genius and therefore cannot really be judged by normal standards. So I'm going to ask the Chief Catering Advisor to the Air Force, who I've asked to be here today, Mr. Flight Lieutenant at that stage, Care, and I had no idea why I'd been asked. And I'm going to ask you now whether you would take this man into your home and try to teach him how to be able to manage his restaurant, not from a culinary point of view, but from an administrative point of view.
Uh-huh.
Would you do that? And I said, yeah, okay. So he came to live in a very small apartment down by the docks in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And on the first night I cooked as normal for the family. And he looked at me over the plate and said, is this the best you can do? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, considering you're under house arrest, yeah, it's about as good as I'm likely to do.
Right.
And he said, well, under those circumstances, I had better cook. And so he was very obsequious, I mean, It was really difficult. And so he started to cook, and in the beginning, he wouldn't let me into the kitchen. And then eventually he'd let me stand there. And then eventually he began to start to talk to me. And this man, without question, is the most brilliant culinarian that I have ever met, and I will continue to say that. And I've met many of the greats. But this one had an involvement with food which is second to none. He was amazing. And so he would cook and explain what it was that was happening to the food in the very innermost parts of the food itself. And I became fascinated, and from that moment on, food and what is happening to it and the way in which it becomes a delight has become, a core central part of my life.
Yeah, that's a great story and a great experience, because it's funny too, because I would have asked you, who inspired you, but you've also really answered that question.
Yes, that is definitely it. I had a number of inspirational things, like the chef at the Savoy Hotel, Competto, who was a good personal friend in the end. But honestly, Robert Beasley, his name was, remains the person who had the greatest influence on my life.
Wow. Let me ask you: do you have anybody now that you think of as being what's the word? Do you have people now that you kind of, I'm not saying heroes, but people now that you admire on a deep level?
Yes, there's a master chef by the name of Karl Guggenmoss, and that's spelled Guggenmoss. Mm-hmm. And he's a Bavarian master chef, and happens to be at the moment the Dean of Culinary Studies at Johnson & Wales University.
Right.
And he and I have become very close, good, personal, professional friends and colleagues. We're both, strangely enough, culinary and also men of faith as well. He wanted to be a minister at one stage and branched off into the culinary life, and I also did the same sort of thing. And so, we have a lot in common, and we're looking into the future. We're both planning to be responsible about 10 years ahead of our time. We're looking at 2020 at the moment, and the sort of things that will need to happen in our culture to see that the food industry begins to mesh with the medical industry or the healthcare industry to this extent. As you know,
Did you hear that? Let me hang on. I'm just going to close the door so I don't have to hear that sound. So one of the unanticipated failures of this type of system. But go ahead.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay. The medical fraternity is sort of based on the Hippocratic Oath, which is do no harm. And the culinary nutrition side of it means delight and do less harm.
Yeah.
We cannot say that we can say do no harm, but we can say that our future depends upon us finding out how to do less harm.
Right.
Yeah. So, yes, that's my. That would be the person that I would position at the top of my list of people I know.
I'm going to come back to this whole theme on this relationship between the culinary delight and the kind of the medicine and the medical realities. We'll come back to that because I think that's going to be interesting and important. But I'll go in the meantime in just with what I have here, so that I feel like I have some sequence or chronology anyway. But I do want to come back to that because I know that it's interesting for me, and I think and I know that it's important to you as well. What was the best advice that you were ever given?
This is a very short phrase. Do a small thing and do it well until it's done.
Well, I like that. That would probably benefit me a great deal. Okay, do a small thing and do it well until it's done.
Yeah. I haven't always behaved that way, but it was the best advice I've ever got.
Well, no, that answers the question very clearly. Do you remember who gave it to you?
Yes, I do. I got it in prayer. So I can't honestly say that it initiated from any person. I mean, if you believe in prayer and believe that sometimes you can hear something, and it's either self-induced,
right,
or it really does come from another source that we don't ever and will never in this lifetime understand.
Yeah. Now, I think the story on this has been told already, but it's still interesting anyway. Which is how I know that you were in military, and this was in New Zealand. I'm curious how the television thing came about.
Yeah, it simply came about because on the Battle of Britain Day in April of 60. Battle of Britain Day in April of 1960, the television, which had been on for about a week, and for which there were only 50 TV sets in the entire country of New Zealand at that time, wanted to do something with the Air Force for Battle of Britain Day. And the physical training instructor for the whole Air Force was going on to do some exercises, and he sprained his ankle.
I love it.
Yeah. And so I was immediately seconded to take his place and told to do something, anything, just go there and do it. So I had a silver flambe lamp, which I'd taken with me as just about the only thing that I traveled with from New Zealand, from the UK to New Zealand.
Right.
And this copper pan which had a silver lining to it. I was very fond of that.
Right.
And So I made an omelette in the style of La Mère Poulade, which is from Mont Saint-Michel in Brittany, which is arguably the world's most famous omelette, and very difficult to do in a sense, because it is. In fact, it was the thing that at the Savoy in London, if there was a commie, who wanted to go, and commie meaning C-O-M-M-I-S, not a member of the Communist Party,
Right.
who wanted to join the brigade there, he had to make for the chef a plain omelette with boiled potatoes. And if he could do that to perfection, then he had a job at the stove there and could learn.
That's great.
And so I made it, and it was it was apparently a tremendous success, and I was apparently funny. But since there was no tape, it was live to air,
right.
Black and white, and it was written up the next day as the best live show to date. And to my knowledge, there were only 3 days before that were actually a signal went out. So
right.
it wasn't the very best of. It's a nice thing if you isolate it, but otherwise,
right.
So the Air Force was rather impressed with that, thought it would be good for recruiting or something, and so I was permitted to do a regular series, which they put on between Peyton Place and the Avengers at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night,
right.
for which I was paid the princely sum of £25, which would have been about $31, for the entire national rights to a prime time program, and for which, of course, I washed up all my little things and everything else in the men's room sink in the TV station, and that's how it began. That's
pretty hilarious. Now, tell me something, just because I missed it. It wasn't just the regular omelet you made. There was a name to this omelet. It was a particular kind of omelet.
No, I just did it. I said this is the way it's made at in La Mère, L-A and then M-E-R, Poulade, P-O-U-L-A-R-D-E, at the Mont Saint-Michel in Brittany. And that's it. It's just an ordinary omelette with butter and cream,
right.
and freshly ground white peppercorns and some crushed sea salt and a little garlic, and that's it. Yeah.
All right, now I'm starting to get a little hungry. Okay, good. Now, let me ask you this: that Galloping Gourmet, influenced and entertained millions of people. Now, I know that obviously you've changed your lifestyle since then. But how do you? I mean, I still look back on it as kind of the start of it all. I mean, for me, we'll talk in a minute about 24-hour. Food television and food and food celebrities. But really, if you think about it, there was Julia Child and there was you. Your show, though, I mean, influenced and entertained millions everywhere in the world. So, I look back on it as kind of like the benchmark and the start of it all. How do you, knowing that it is that you've changed, the way that you prepare and eat and live, how do you look back on that Galloping Gourmet experience?
Well, you have to see where it started, because it started on radio in New Zealand, where I was asked to do a radio program, and I think it was called, I can't even remember what it was called now, but Cook's Tour, yes. And I simply spoke for 6 episodes about some of the experiences I had around the world before I came to New Zealand, which were not very many, and they weren't very deep, but they were personal, and I associated that with a recipe, and it was very successful. So they asked me to do another one, and another one, and so I eventually ran out of personal experiences,
right,
and found a book called the Esquire Cookbook, and it was just stuff that had been in Esquire magazine, and was put together very engagingly with lots of stories about the places in much the same way that I had been doing the radio program. And I just loved this book, and I loved it, and so I simply never said that I had been to these places, but I invaded those places and used that material and actually created recipes in some cases for those places which they had never had, but were somewhat similar. So although you could call it vaguely plagiaristic, in fact, I was very sort of ethical and am hopefully still today. So I never really said, this is me, and I went to, such and such a restaurant on Madison Avenue and things like that. But I knew enough from this book to talk about it. And so this led from one thing to another, and we've been taken across the Tasman Sea to Australia and started doing an Australian program. I must tell you that in the middle of all that, my wife Trina screamed one day watching me on television as I was trying to be funny because a producer had told me to be funny in this particular way, which was very unfunny.
Right.
But she was so devastated by this that she went down. She said, you are the most unutterably boring man in the entire world, and you need to do something about it. This is awful. And I said, well, if you're so clever, why don't you produce it then? And she said, all right, I will. And went down to Broadcasting House, and they said, all right, fine. And so Trina began to produce me, and that's when everything started to really happen. Right. So I went to Australia. In Australia, we were discovered by an American who came down and offered us this 650-episode contract to do the Galloping Gourmet. And it was then that Trina leapt in with both feet. She was also pregnant at the same time, so it was some added weight. And just simply said, I want the first 6 minutes of this program. You can have the rest, which was about 11 and a half minutes for the rest. And she said, by all means, do your food thing. I could care less about food, but I do care that you entertain people. This is an entertainment media. She'd been in the theater, and she'd been a J. Arthur Rank starlet, and the whole bit. She's very, very much a theatrical person. And so I was taught how to stand up and turn around, and I always had a sense of humor, and she simply took that and made it into a unique combination where the stress, tension between the two of us, with her demanding that I entertain and me trying to survive as a culinarian. Between the two, we actually, every episode was a fight to survive those two elements to survive together.
She was way ahead of her time.
Yes.
In the recognition, she essentially with you established the genre, really.
Yes, I think everybody that we've ever met is very charming and absolutely accurate. She got 2 Emmy nominations as daytime TV producer of the year, and we were beaten into second place by the Today Show in both cases. But that's a very good example of how a program made in Ottawa in Canada got to get into 38 countries around the world with arguably, I say arguably because whoever knows with ratings, but they used to say that we had reached the 200 million mark by the time that everybody had seen the program. So
yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Do you look back on that experience? I'm hearing, of course, that it was, from a work perspective, it was challenging and stressful. But do you ever think about the impact that it made?
I'm aware of it. I don't know even today what I think about it.
Right.
I have to tell you that in fact, during that time it was a blur. And, we had 3 kids, and we hardly ever saw them. We'd get up fairly late because we got back home fairly late each day, and at 11 o'clock we got home. So we were back in the studio at 11 o'clock the next day. We rehearsed during the day for the evening, sometimes 3 shows back to back with the same audience. And at the moment we finished that, we did a bunch of commercials for the sponsors, jumped on a plane, flew around the world to get the next things in as many as 8 or 9 different countries and 40 or 50 different restaurants. Gathering all the information together, testing and developing all of that, Trina editing all the film, getting all the jokes assembled, and then we'd hit the studios once again, another 65, and then straight off on another one. And, you know, no human being should ever have to live that way.
Right.
And you cannot do that for long. We were on our way around the United States making the final series of the programs, which was to be how great dishes from the world arrived in the United States and how they changed because of our culture. We were doing it all the way around the United States, and we were being driven in a motorhome from place to place. Every night we were being driven, every day we were filming, and it was only on the second day that we were hit by a vegetable truck, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I was partially paralyzed. Trina couldn't work anymore. And we were really badly beaten up, and so that became it. So, if that truck hadn't hit us, I'm almost certain that we may not have finished that series. You know, we were both we had climbed out on the bough of the tree of life, if you will, and in this accident, the bough broke.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Now, do I feel? What do I feel about this? I worked really, really hard to do this properly.
Right.
And a lot of people who, when we arrived and started jumping over a chair with a glass of wine, there were some gourmets who thought this was impolite. Not only impolite, but brash, Australian, and whatever this person is should not be allowed. You know. And I understand their position 100%. In fact, I was really always concerned about what they might think. And so, by way of compensation, I did everything I could to do it right. So I'm pleased with the professionalism and with which I approached the programs, and I'm very pleased that we rehearsed everything completely from a technical, culinary point of view, and then let the comedy happen as it happened. Trina would allow time for me to run amok, if you will. The live audience was very important. We sold out every ticket, every season, which was 65 shows in 6 weeks. All the tickets were always sold out by the second day that they were offered. We were, you know, apart from Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, we were the hottest ticket in town.
You know, well, there's two things. One is there's always going to be, as you know better than I, there's always going to be detractors, especially when you're breaking, when you're breaking new ground. But I will say, as a student of the genre and someone who has not only seen virtually every television cooking show since, I even spent some time up at the Food Network. It was where I got my internship after getting a culinary degree. I will tell you that what you brought to it, what was a joyfulness that made it not only compelling but kind of addictive to watch. I mean, what you're responding to wasn't only salivary. It was also just the notion of having immense joy in the kitchen, and no one has ever since then been able to come close to replicating that. I mean, you really still, and I mean this genuinely from the bottom of my heart, nobody else has been able to do what it is that you did. The closest must have taken, years and years and years until the Food Network figured out that they had this Emeril Lagasse. Now, Emeril is a perfectly good chef and a good businessman, and he's not bad on camera, but he certainly doesn't have 1/10 of the natural comedic ability or sense of humor or whatever. So I mean, nobody's really ever been able to do what you did at the level that you did it.
Yes, well, and as I say, I think that may have happened because of the tension.
Yeah, maybe.
Here's Trina demanding that I entertain and grading each program on the basis of entertainment.
Right.
And here's me doing everything I can to do the dish decently and in a followable fashion so that somebody could replicate it.
Yeah. How many episodes did you end up shooting?
I think it was just over 400 that
yeah.
we had in the end. Yeah.
Now, sorry.
But 1,800 so far, in terms of actual episodic works that I've done.
Right, yeah, even beyond that, right?
Yeah.
Now, what do you make of this 24-hour, food television, celebrity chefs, and celebrity culture? What's your take on that?
I think it's fine. I have to tell you that I have watched in order so that I could respond, professionally to it. I have the sense that it's rather like it's a little bit like making, in our case, a handmade motor car. I don't know, a Cord or something like that. In the old days, which a bunch of people would fuss around and push it down the line, and or just actually finish it off in a warehouse somewhere and then drive it out, versus a sort of production line in which a perfectly good vehicle comes down the line and lots of different people do different things to it, and eventually it highly polished motor car and it's off the line. It's great.
Yeah.
So I see it like that. I see the Food Network 24 hours a day must be a production line, and they must have very good people who work all the time back of scenes and doing things, for many different people. And I suspect that there's that marvelous machine which allows a person to look at the camera and be in fact seeing the amount of measurements that they're supposed to put into a dish and what they're supposed to do next. But when you have to remember it and remember everything, and you do that in a rehearsal in the afternoon, and you come back before a live audience with that memory of that thing, and you have to remember 3 dishes back to back, as well as 3 sometimes reprehensible jokes. I just, I'm just grateful that they don't have to go through that, because it's obviously it's a different kind of situation, and frankly, I think that the Food Network gives people opportunities to be in front of the public, which is wonderful for the chef who has a restaurant or whatever, and obviously profits enormously from the exposure. I had no restaurant. And all I had was a recipe that I could put in a book and sell a book, which was wonderful in those days. Now, of course, the recipes wind up on the web, and recipes are 10,000 recipes that anybody would ever want to find, they can find that way.
Yeah.
So there's something that was uniquely person to person about what I did, as I say, like a handmade motor car.
Yeah.
And this is something else. But I admire the way that some of them do what they do, and I have made up my mind that there are too many critics in our country, in our nation, people who earn their living by being critical of everybody else. And I would love to be a contributor and contribute to the common good rather than criticize the individual.
Yeah, I hear you. That's
my view.
That's a good view. Just final on that subject. Knowing what it is that you know from your experience, is there any advice that you would give to today's, television chefs?
Yes, I'd give them the piece of advice that Trina gave me, which I think is absolutely brilliant. It may be too late for them already, but never, never, never watch yourself back.
What's the thinking behind that? I like that.
I've only ever seen 4 of my programs, even subsequent to being to not doing them, because she says to me, the moment that you see yourself doing something that you approve of, you will run a little video in the back of your mind, and you'll reproduce that.
Yeah.
And he said, and then the thing, when you see yourself doing something you don't like, you will simply edit that out, and you become an edited person,
right,
and not a real person, and you must retain reality. I have found that I'm ethically am not prepared to talk about anything that I have not personally encountered. And Trina, who I met at 11 at school, is my very first girlfriend, and we've been married 55 years now. So we've been through a number of scary situations with a heart attack and a stroke and diabetes and hypertension, all that.
Right.
And so I had to find a way that we could live our lives differently, because the work that we did with Galloping Gourmet and all of that, and it was such high stress and such high pressure, and the food was so rich, in fact, that none of this was doing her any good at all. And so we had to find a way to change. And so we pulled a major U-turn. And in pulling that major U-turn, I have learned a number of lessons. One of which is, do not set up rules. If you set up rules, you'll get a rebellion. If you get a rebellion, you'll work out some kind of compromise. And if you have a compromise situation, you're doing less than you could do for the future health, and you're likely to get major disease as a result of that. And that's exactly what happened to us. Yeah. So what I did is I looked for tact rather than rule. And tact is taste, aroma, color, and texture.
Right.
And I split up the whole of food, and you can go on my website and you can see there a food preference sheet.
I've seen it. Yeah, no, I've seen it. I'm familiar with tact.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
Okay. So Trina filled that in. I looked at that. I simply took the foods which are risky for her, which I've now got on the website as the treat threat concept. So I identified 38 foods which were likely to exacerbate her problem. And I simply gave her a variety of portion sizes that she could go into there, and types of produce, from whole milk to 1% or skim, that sort of thing, choices to make. She and I made those choices together, and so we did the reduction thing, what we call the H factor, which is we take the H is the letter that turns a treat into a threat. So that's high in volume and high in repetition for food. We simply reduced the volume of it and the repetitiousness of it, and then we replaced that food with foods that she loved to eat. So we actually enhanced the quality of the food. I was amazed when I saw that. I've always been interested in recipes from around the world and great chefs and things. But now I was actually dealing with her personal preferences and what I knew about food and how I could switch ingredients. And I knew enough about methods of cooking, so all I needed to do was take a method, take her ingredients, shift to a lowercase the threatening foods, and to an uppercase the treat foods, and I would reinvent her cuisine. And that's what I do now. And as we did it, we came up, I saw that we were spending considerably less money on the food that we were doing. We had reduced meat protein from 10 ounces down to about 4, and in doing so, we were saving about $1,000 a year for our family. So I reinvested 500 of that in fruits and vegetables that went along her fruits and her vegetables that she liked. And the other 500 we invested in 2 children, one in Brazil and the other one in Ethiopia.
Nice.
And we did that on an ongoing basis, not just once, just not a flash in the pan. We actually did over 10 years. The girl disappeared in Brazil, unfortunately, but we continued with Sadek, who, by the way, is now starting to be a restaurant manager. He was 10 when we started with him.
Wow.
So that's been very interesting because we connected our change to a change of someone else who was at crucial difficulty and unable to sort of manage life itself. So our change in life, which benefited us, benefits them. So this, we think, is called a double benefit, and this we really, really passionate. That's absolutely the sum of my life. That's what I choose to want to do in every way in which I can. So that I'm taking this as a concept and rolling this out with many different people, and have seen people actually be able to succeed to do things that on their own and for their own sake they might not have succeeded in doing. And Trina has really changed because of that. So and at this state, I'm a Scot, so and I'm borderline obsessive compulsive type. So
Right.
I simply have totaled everything that we have managed to do by way of lifestyle change in food, and it's over $41,000 now that we've shifted from our food budget into other people's lives. And
That's beautiful work.
doing their thing. So, yes, we have to change that. If we're going to have Medicare and Medicaid, if we're going to have any kind of socially ordered medical supply in our culture, we, the citizens, have got to change the way we behave in our lives. And that means we, the citizens, have got to stop selling each other portion sizes and food which is dangerous to the public health. And we have to find a way to do that without the government having to legislate that. So
Right.
there is what we call the Dow, and the Dow is, DOW, is how we invest ourselves and our behavior in our future. We invest our money in the Dow, in the stock market. We invest our Dow is our degree of willingness to consider a U-turn in the way we're living our lives. And this we have to do by the year 2020.
I'm with you, and I'll do my part to help on that. Now, because I have you only for 11 minutes more, we'll do this next piece as the lightning round.
Okay, good.
You have
I will be brief.
Do you have a motto?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a motto?
A motto?
Yeah.
Well, I have a family, yes. Let's see. Humility comes before honor.
Okay, done. What is your greatest hope?
That we in the United States will make major lifestyle changes by the year 2020.
Perfect.
Without legalism and without the government telling us how to do it.
Perfect. Do you have also, and you don't have to, it was the other side of hope, I was going to ask if you have a regret, but I'm wondering if maybe the better way to look at it is something important that you learned along the way that you would want to now share, rather than looking at it as a regret. What learning experience?
No. I can tell you a regret.
Okay.
Absolutely, and I think it's a good question. I spent 19 and a half hours on every program that I did in the Galloping Gourmet series. Right? Now, I regret that I did not spend 30 hours on it, but I couldn't. There were not enough hours in the year available, and so I cut corners and simply had to proceed. When I had apparently knocked one of the hurdles down, I just kept on running.
Right.
And I would, if I could do it again, I would want to clear every hurdle and I would need to spend more time doing it. And I now, at this point in my life, am growing at the speed of life, which is the latest book, and I mean it. I am taking what time I need to take to do everything that I do well. Right.
That's good. I love that. I love that. Now, these questions you can do with what you want with them. If you, what's in your refrigerator right now?
Well, there's a beautiful. I actually was very pleased that I did it right this time. A wonderful pineapple, which had managed to survive the mechanism of getting it from Hawaii, and it wasn't picked too green. And that with I've got some packages which are now being done of some organic brown rice, which, as you know, takes 40 minutes to cook. So this is being cooked and frozen, and I find that very helpful. It's just getting ahead of the curve for me. I have onions, I have carrots, which I dug the final carrots out of the ground from last year's behavior. I have very just cuttable arugula growing in the greenhouse, a whole swathe of it, which is growing up now, the wild one. Let's see. What else have I got? I've got skim. I've got organically silk, which is, the soy milk thing. Let's see. I have a rotisserie chicken from the local store, which they put too much sodium in.
Right.
What else have I got? I've got a whole bunch of Dannon doing Activa, the new small container low-fat yogurts and different sizes, and we have that as a dessert with some freshly chopped nuts in there and a few dried blueberries and cranberries, and that becomes a little dessert that we have. So this is the sort of thing that's in my fridge now.
I hear you. It sounds good and colorful and nutritious.
Yes.
Well, are there? It's funny because here's the issue, and again, I'm the guy that does all the cooking here.
Right.
So, and I have kids, so I am very conscious of what goes into their body. How? It's taste, aroma, color, and texture. But are there some other kind of tricks, if you will, that you use to ensure that you can maximize the flavor profile of?
Yeah. Well, I'm a great fan of baoziang, which is that's just a description of it. Baosyang is the way I pronounce it. It's two separate words, and that's explosion of fragrance. And this is the Three Musketeers: the green onion, the ginger, and the garlic, all fresh. And this goes into the base of many different dishes that I do. All soups that I do started out with baoziang. All of the stir fries that start out that way, and that gives me an abundant flavor characteristic through what I do. And people who actually cook my dishes for me, I can determine immediately whether they follow the recipe right, because it really does have a different fragrance and signature to it. Any deep, dark dish, which is more mysterious than jambalayas and things like that, and then I take tomato paste and I cook the tomato paste down so that it ceases to be red and looks mahogany in color. It just caramelizes and deepens down. And if you take a flavor, the flavor molecule expansion on that one is absolutely amazing. If a gas chromatography, when you see the difference, it goes up to almost 460 from about 40 flavor molecules. It's like 100% increase. And so that I use instead of brown roux and butters and things of that nature. I use very little saturated fat. One of the things that I do, which has applied all through, is to take a yogurt which has no thickener or pectin or anything else in it. It's just straight yogurt, and I make fresh yogurt cheese. Just slip it into a strainer and let it drip overnight, 12 hours or so, like this. And now I've got fresh cheese, and I use that instead of sour cream, and I use that on a light scone with a little bit of raspberry jam and things like that for afternoon tea. And that one ingredient, by the way, which I use as a basis for making white sauces, I reduce the stock and thicken the stock with cornstarch, and then I temper that cheese with a little warm that thickened stock, and then add the rest of the stock to the cheese, and then I've got a perfectly good bechamel kind of coating sauce, but it really is a yogurt sauce. And so when I take all of that, and I use that to spread on toast and things like that, I use, wouldn't believe it, isn't part of the Mediterranean one with olive oil, and I mix it half and half with this yogurt cheese. That becomes a spread that we use for breads and sandwiches and things.
Smart, I love it.
So I think that I'm the right side of 60,000 calories a year less saturated fat per head in our family by the use of that product. So those would be three examples.
Yeah, those are good. Those are great examples. If you could have three people to dinner from any time in history, who would they be?
I really would like to talk to Churchill about his lifestyle.
And you probably don't want to invite Lady Esterton along.
Yes. I would very much like to have my first mentor, which is Monsieur André Simon, the world president and founder of the Wine and Food Society. And he took me under his wing when I was a kid, and I used to visit him at his home in Little Hedge Court in Sussex. He was a customer of ours, so I would like that a lot. So those are two people that I would love to have.
I got you. And what about if you were stranded on a deserted island? What 5 ingredients would you want to be stranded with?
Oh well, probably. Let me be almost facetious. Yogurt, concentrated tomato paste with. Perhaps it with some good Roma tomatoes, so that like Viva Italia, which is an amazing Roma tomato, which is blight resistant and marvelous and good sweet sour balance. So I could grow that, and then I could make my reduction, from that. And I must have root ginger and garlic. And I think the scallions, yes, the green onions, that would be fine for me. I don't really need fresh products, and I'm a virtual vegetarian now. 2 or 3 ounces maybe of fresh protein. I'm 7 or 8 or 9 servings of fruit and vegetables a day. So.
There's nothing that you miss or crave.
There really isn't now. I would in the past have said some smoked salmon from Scotland, but I had some the other day, and I thought, well, okay, not really. The things that we eat now, we just have such joy over, and it's relatively simple. This new book, Growing at the Speed of Life, as I said, if there's a chance of mentioning that, I'd be grateful.
I'm happy to.
I've simply turned the corner to the extent that I've started growing my own food, and I'm just utterly amazed by how it's like I've met Trina all over again. At the beginning, when I first saw her, a vegetable that I've grown myself and harvested myself and brought into the kitchen and cooked myself within a half an hour or so of actually consuming it, is the most extraordinary experience I've ever had. It's not just the taste of it; it's just the whole sweat equity involvement.
Sure.
And yeah.
Final two for you. What do you hope your legacy will be?
I hope that people might remember me for the idea of the double benefit. And my reading line on that was, habits that harm can become resources that heal. And I think of us in the United States at the moment. I did with a CPA, friend of mine. We tried to do an analysis. I don't think it's very fair, but it seems about $150 billion a year we spend regularly harming ourselves in the United States. If we were just to split that and put some of that back into enhancing our own lives with the kind of food that we eat, or just lifestyle, whatever choices we make, but we'll just spend the other half of that, about $75 billion, looking for some of the most unjust, difficult situations in our world today that need help. I think we, the people, would be able to say about ourselves, this is who we are. This is America. These are our ethics. This is the good we want to do. And that we would find different ways of doing it rather than going and poking, a large offensive weapon at somebody and telling them we're just about to blow them away. I think that's a better way to live, and I hope that we'll be living that way in the next 10 years.
My final, I hear you, and I'm with you. My final question for you, and it may sound redundant, but it's not. What do you know for sure?
What do I know for sure?
I borrowed this from my friend Gene Siskel. He and I were friends before he had brain cancer. I think it must have been 51 or 52 that he died, but he was a brilliant guy, and we hung out together. And he would always end every one of his interviews. I think it was the Chicago trip with that question: what do you know for sure?
I know that I have a soul, and I know the soul doesn't end here.
Got it.
And that's it. And I know that if I unconditionally give myself to other people, that it makes a hole in my soul. And eventually, I believe that there'll be a connection to the person that I cared for. And the people that cared for me, there'll be a connection back to me. In a future, I can't call it life, but in an eternity, if you will, there are relationships based upon the degree of unconditional love that is applied in this life. There you go. That's about as good as I can. It's a very difficult. It's a lovely question. It's a difficult question to ask answer off the top of my head. But that's where that's what I know.
I'm with you. I think it's good. I hope I can do justice to it. Just remind me? Is it growing at the speed of life?
Yes.
And what's the release? Where is it in the scheme of things? Is it available now?
Yes, it is. It was launched on the 1st of this month.
Oh, perfect. And is it available on in Amazon, or how would people access it?
At Amazon, and on the 1st of April as a Kindle electronic book.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely get that in.
Yeah.
Nice work, Graham Kerr. That was a treat for me to be able to speak with you and to get and generous of you to take the time to answer these questions.
I should be delighted to be of any help that I can.
Thank you so much, and the same for me. Anything that I can do to be helpful, you can count on me for that as well. I love what you're doing, and I always have.
Not only a talent and an innovator, he will go down as one of the greatest, I think, in the history of food television. and also a genuinely great and caring and lovely human being. That's it, episode 100, All You Can Eat. Join me next week, and we'll do it again. Until then, pick up a copy of my book. It's called Short Order Dad, and it's good for the holidays. It's good for anybody, anytime, who wants to learn how to cook. Remember, life is short, my friends, so never waste a meal.
I'm the Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on